I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2-box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, consciousness, and spirituality. Today's episode is with Melissa Berton, an Academy Award-winning producer, an Eleanor Roosevelt Global Women's Rights recipient, Forbes 50 over 50 honoree, and the founder of the PAD Project, which I'm so excited to talk about. Melissa Berton, lifelong advocate for girls and women, has taught English at Oakwood Secondary School in Los Angeles for over a decade, and as a faculty advisor for Girls Learn International, a program of the Feminist Majority Foundation, advocating for equal access to education across genders. She has thrice participated as a delegate to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, leading the largest student delegation from a single high school. And she also won an Academy Award for Best Documentary Short for the documentary Period, End of Sentence. And this Oscar win sparked a global conversation about period poverty and menstrual equality. So welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Melissa, to kick it off, how do you think about and address some of the kind of taboos and misconceptions around menstruation and period blood as a teacher?
As a teacher, I think that I am naturally connected to this. I know that high school takes in different ages around the world, but most what we call high school are mostly young people, and I'm talking about young women between the ages of, I want to say, 12 and 17. And of course, most individuals around those ages will experience the onset of menstruation, menarche, and begin to have their period. And at the same time, they are experiencing intellectual growth and transformation, and their minds are being opened up to all kinds of wonderful subjects. So when I learned as a teacher, my subject is literature, English literature, and when I learned that 1 in 4 girls around the world drops out of school due to a lack of access to a safe means to manage her period, I was just astounded and I think ashamed that I had never kind of considered it a privilege that I had the means to manage my own period, that most of my students where I live also could manage their periods. And so we determined, my students and I, to take action to try and change that. And that's how our odyssey began.
So yeah, and your odyssey and your journey is so fascinating. So I want to double click on this. Well, first of all, you mentioned a term that I think not everyone knows. It's menarche. Can you explain what menarche is before we move on?
Absolutely. Menarche is the onset of menstruation. So it simply means when a girl, and sometimes it indeed is a girl and not a young woman, experiences her first period. Around the world, menarche is happening for girls as early as 9 years old. And it can happen even earlier. In most cases, menarche usually comes at around the age of 12.
Got it. Okay. And you go so back to this journey. So you were sort of astounded by this menstrual inequity, and then like, what did you do about it? Most people would just sort of kind of sit with that information and feel frustration, but you decided to sort of take matters into your own hands. So tell us about your journey.
Well, I had the good fortune to travel with my students as their chaperone, and we, as a group, had the good fortune to be delegates to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, which occurs every year. And we learned about this fact, and I think we were just fired up, or whatever the going phrase is now. I don't know if that's a dated phrase, but we couldn't sit with it. I think because it was news to all of us. And at the same time, we had the good fortune to have a kind of solution in what we had also heard about at that conference, which was an invention, a pad making machine, which is about the size of 3 blenders, nothing super complicated, but it was a machine whereby pads could be created from locally sourced material. The inventor, I'm going to mess up on his first name. His last name is Muruganathan. And Muruganathan invented this machine. And we learned about that machine, and we happened to be in touch with, through Girls Learn International, an organization which seeks to educate girls to the same degree as boys worldwide. We had a partner organization in India called Action India that was also a chapter of Girls Learn International, and they wanted one of Muruganathan's machine. So we thought, we have the capability here in Los Angeles to fundraise not only for the machine for that village in Kathikera, which is in northern India, but we also have the inspiration, and we want to try to document the process on film because we felt that awareness needed to be raised about this issue.
So, Melissa, what did you learn about, the experience of women and young girls really starting their periods in India, and kind of what the education level was around that subject? Because I'm sort of curious, like, what the key takeaways and themes were on that journey, and also what you document in the documentary.
So, really, it's not just in India, but it is in India too. And around the world, there is a almost shocking lack of knowledge and education about what happens to one's own body. And this when going through menstruation, so that on top of maybe not having supplies, and the statistics are different for different countries and different regions, and it's hard to get exact statistics because this has been an under-researched and understudied issue. But if you go to our website and other places like that, you can get a breakdown of the number of people who really don't have knowledge about their reproductive health and biology by country and region. And it might surprise you that in some high income countries like the United States, there's not that much a difference in other countries as well. And what many countries have in common is that there is patriarchy in many countries around the world. And when we are in a patriarchal world, menstruation for most cultures and communities has been stigmatized and has been a source of shame. So it's something that families keep hush hush until there's a need to know basis, and even then the information isn't always accurate. It has to do with a lot of perpetuating a lot of myths around menstruation, that you're going to kill the crops, you can't go in the kitchen, you're going to spoil the food, you can't go in a temple, you'll anger the gods, whatever the case may be. And so our aim, our hope was that by making this film, we might work to dismantle some of those attitudes toward menstruation.
And this is such a powerful film. I think for those who have not watched it, go and watch it. It's called Period, End of Sentence. And, what is the cost of maybe like the continuing lack of education, lack of resources? Like what's at stake here?
Well, our tagline for our organization, the PAD Project, is a period should end a sentence, not a girl's education. And 1 in 4 girls around the world will miss school because she doesn't have the means to access a safe way to manage her period. So, first of all, that's the cost of, 1/4 of girls, school going girls around the world missing an opportunity to have an education. And that's just the loss to that in actual dollars is staggering. So that I don't know the current numbers now, but I know that it's in billions and I know that it's over. I If girls were educated to the same degree as boys, each country's GDP would go up by billions. There is many people believe, and I am one of them, that our whole world, the greatest move that we can make to improve our world is to educate all girls. Think of the wealth of knowledge that we are missing out on because the next physicist or the next doctor or the next teacher is unable to continue her education because she's missing school, because she's just going to be a child bride, or she's going to be sex trafficked, or she's not going to be able to have access to her education because she gets an infection because of her period, because she doesn't have a hygienic means to manage it. So for all of us, I think the stakes are really, really high. And it's very sad to right here in the United States recently. So the United States is going through a good wave, and it is a positive momentum of schools that have a certain degree below the poverty line must include menstrual products in their bathrooms. But just as an example of something that happened just the other day, a legislator who reluctantly did vote to pass that bill said, well, that's $70,000 going down the toilet. Um, he's
Wow.
talking about, and just that's the attitude. And I think that's because women and girls, he's talking about for all of us. I think most of your listeners, and I think many people would agree that there's really no price you can put on education, but to deny people their basic means of getting that education, which for girls does mean a means to manage their period, is really something we ought to be getting past.
It's so fascinating, Melissa. Just like women's health legislation in general in the US feels like it's kind of done a deprioritization across the board, on financial, on all levels. I'm curious, what has been your perspective on legislation, on moving things forward? I'm sure that after the film was released, and especially after you won an Oscar, there's probably a lot of organizations that wanted to get involved. I'm just curious, like, what has played out so far?
Well, I love that you believe a lot of organizations want to get involved, and certainly there have been some. But sadly, I want to say that the stigma and shame around menstruation is so great that many kind of cultural guideposts or things that we would think would embrace this message, especially after we won the Oscar, especially after, half of the population will experience menstruation, have turned away or shied away from directly embracing menstrual health care as part of their platforms. As an example, after Period End of Sentence, we published a companion book called Period End of Sentence, the next chapter in the fight for menstrual justice. And in that book, we sort of provide the state of the state in different countries and regions around all these issues that affect menstrual equity. And the book is by a New York Times bestselling author, Anita Diamond. It has the Oscar and the film behind it. And normally on a book like that, the publicist for the book wants to get it to shows. In the United States, we have shows where, like, there's a doctor, a talk show, these are morning shows, these are talk shows, these are shows that would be interviews with medical experts, with teachers, and nobody wanted to interview it. And the answer always came back with, yeah, we saw the movie. We love the movie. Wow, this is so important. You know what? Our daytime viewers, it's too shocking. It's too taboo. It's too, the word that they didn't say was, icky or gross, which some people have said to us. But one thing has become really clear to me is that blood shed in all kinds of other ways can be seen as macho or, pride building and that kind of thing, badges of courage. But period blood is something that people don't want to see or talk about. And so that's been something we've been fighting. The attitude is changing. It definitely is. But it is slow going, and it's definitely something we combat at the PAD project.
It's such a great point that you make, Melissa, that blood is like readily available in like so many films and,
Right.
so many places in culture we can easily see blood. But when you talk about menstrual blood, it is something that definitely does still feel like there's a stigma around it. And I'm curious, like why is there such a stigma around this subject? This is a natural kind of experience for most people, who have a cycle to go through. And so it's a bit bizarre that we've sort of, sequestered it away from the conversation. And I think, I'm also curious if you've noticed. Well, let me just keep the question there, and then I'll continue.
Sure. So forgive me, what am I responding to?
Why is there such a stigma? Why is there such a,
Oh,
yeah.
right. That is the $1,000,000 question. And I think that there is such a stigma because I think that most cultures and countries around the world are patriarchal. And I think that the desire and need to keep men in power, to maintain the system, as it were, whatever system that is, government, the highest spheres of finance, uh, to keep men in power, there is a fear and a need to keep women out of the highest circles of power, which often include money or policy making or that kind of thing. And so I think, Yasmin, when we've spoken before, I've shared with you how, as a teacher of literature, in our earliest texts, and I love these texts, I want to be clear, I love them all. And however, these worlds, whether it's the Mahabharata or the Old Testament, New Testament, the Odyssey, where we're with the Greek gods, these sort of texts of origination show the patrilineal line, so that people are identified by their fathers and their grandfathers. Women are bought and sold valued and devalued based upon their virginity or lack thereof, their ability to produce and have children for men who are kings, and they're devalued if they can't produce children. Of course, boy children are more valued than girl children, so femicide is a real issue even today in many countries, because the chance that a girl child will go on to make money and be able to provide for the family is much smaller than a male child. So all of these, the mantle of all of these patriarchies makes it very difficult to get away from periods as away from seeing them for what they are, which is a tremendous sign of health and well-being, and exactly tied to our reproductive cycle. Were it not for the menstrual cycle, of course, menstruation is part of our reproductive cycle, and a healthy menstruation means that we can conceive and we can give life. And so on the one hand, there's this great power that women have, and so it's no accident, perhaps, that menstruation is received with so much fear in the world and shuddering. With my students, we finished. We're reading the Odyssey right now, which your listeners are probably familiar with, and it always fascinates me that the monsters, which are great monsters. There's one that's Scylla. She's a beast with 9 heads or 6 heads. I'm forgetting right now, but each head is filled with teeth and eats Odysseus's crewmen. Then there's another monster, and her name, notice her, is Charybdis, and she's a vortex. She's a whirlpool, and she can suck whole ships of men down. And so you begin to see in all this literature that there is almost this fear of women as able to devour men, subsume men, and then if you are somebody who enjoys power, maybe what you have to do is say, oh, actually, women are dirty and women can't be, and they have this thing that happens to their body that we don't understand, but we're kind of afraid of it. And so women maybe need to, not enter our temples and not, be around our crops and go off into huts when they go through this time that we don't understand.
Yeah, wow. I love that you brought up the Odyssey and the journey, and just like how pervasive this kind of these themes have have been part of the cultural zeitgeist for so
Yeah.
long, right? I'm also, I want to actually introduce your other film because I think it's a good time to introduce it, Long Line of Women, and can you tell us what that was about and why you wanted to create that?
Absolutely. And I'm like, as I'm talking, I'm worried that I sound like one of those monsters I'm talking about who has, wants to devour men. And it's not that at all. My point is that for centuries upon centuries, this kind of attitude has prevailed. And of course, we know there are wonderful men, societies all along that have been in partnership and celebration with women. And one such or many such communities tend to be indigenous communities. So right now I'm talking about Native Americans. There are so many different communities, but there are many Native American communities that have had ceremonies and are just now revitalizing ceremonies which actually celebrate monarchy, the coming of age, as a girl's coming into power in her society, becoming a leader, and the whole community comes together. And there is a ritual, there is a making of her costume, which men and women do together. So Long Line of Ladies is the second film that has been produced by the PAD Project. And we were frustrated. we have so much pride in period, end of sentence, but there was also this idea that I felt like we had contributed to, which is
Mm,
that, oh, period poverty and period stigma is something that happens only in low income countries, and it happens out
mm,
there, and we don't have it here in the United States or Europe or whatever country you may pick. And in fact, that's not the case. So we knew, for one thing, that we wanted to locate our next film in the United States, and we wanted to see if we couldn't shift the paradigm and focus on a community that has been ostracized by settlers and colonizers in the United States. And we were in relationship with the Karuk family in Northern California, where they still do the ihuk, which is a girl's coming of age ceremony. And Ati is a young girl. She's 13, and she has experienced her first period, which means that she is ready for her flower dance, her ihuk. And this film, Long Line of Ladies, is about this community coming together, men, women, young, old. It's very beautiful, in contemporary, right in the middle of a junior high school basketball hoops. They're coming together to celebrate her ihuk, and it is a very, very beautiful, to my mind, film. And when I showed this film to the 15-year-old students that I have, to a student, each student was crying and saying, "Oh my God, I could never imagine that reaction to my period." I was in a dressing room at Target, and my, sister threw a pad over the dressing room wall and said, "Deal with it." And just this idea of like, "Oh, now you're in for it. Good luck to you," or, shame. And so the idea that a whole community would come together to honor and celebrate this coming of age ritual was really profound to see.
yeah, it was such a powerful film. And I think, like you mentioned, the reactions to that as women is just like, it's so powerful because so many of us did not have kind of a sacred portal into womanhood. It was sort of this, again, kind of, and for many of us, treated similarly to how we, when we have our periods, like a little bit of a nuisance, and so
Yeah.
yeah, so it's such a powerful, I think, symbol for us to remember that, that there could be a sacredness for this next generation of women, or anyone who has a cycle, to really to move through that space with a little bit more gentleness and sacredness and a collective sort of embrace. I want to talk a little bit about your journey towards raising money for the film, because you're a teacher, right? But you went on to create a documentary, many documentaries now, and also start the Pad Project, which I want to get into. But you really started out as a teacher. You didn't have experience in the film world, so I'm very impressed with how fast you became an Academy Award winning filmmaker. And so, what was that journey like for you in terms of raising money and getting the right people? How did that play out?
Right. So it was nuts and just wonderful and scary, and sometimes, wanting to pull the hair out with all the pressure and the stress. And I am fortunate to be at a school. It's Oakwood School in North Hollywood, where when when my students and I returned from the United Nations conference, and we said, we want to make a documentary. We had no idea how to make a documentary. We just knew that we wanted to. We want to raise money for a documentary, and we want to put it out there, and we want to be public about periods. And this was in 2014 when I started engaging my school, Oakwood School, and administration in talking about this. And I think it is unique that Oakwood is an independent progressive school. And I think that the attitude of their saying, yes, by all means, this is important. We support you. Do this was the first step, because I can imagine I've been a teacher for many years in all different kinds of schools, and that was a unique and permissive reaction. So that's the first thing, because what the school's support and permission to both me and the students enabled was that I could have time where I wasn't always teaching English, but I was working on this film. And we have a program called Immersion that we could immerse ourselves in working on this project. So all of that was a gift. And then, candidly speaking, we live in Los Angeles, where there are many filmmakers. And though I may have been shy about approaching people in our community who certainly had more expertise than I did, I was not shy about pushing my students to ask their uncles and their parents and their neighbors. And I think that what happened is that people were looking at young women. I feel like, I asked so many people for help along the way, but maybe the smartest thing if I did in the beginning of the journey was to see that young women have the most powerful voice in being advocates, so that when somebody who is your neighbor or goddaughter or daughter or niece says to you, hey, girls my age aren't going to school, won't you help us put together a Kickstarter campaign? Will you tell us how to apply for film festivals? And because young people who really clearly cared about the issue and were invested, I think we got a lot of tremendous advice and help, without which we could not have continued. So there was not one step that we took where we were like, we don't know how to start a nonprofit. We don't know how to create a Kickstarter. We don't know how to get a machine from the south of India to the north of India. Help, help, help. And because, because half of the population sort of recognizes this issue once you say it, I think we had tremendous help. And to your question of how did this reception of the film happen so fast? And I think that we definitely did not know what we had, even though I feel so proud of the film. And Raika Zatabshi, our director, went to India for the price, the price of a ticket. I think because the subject matter resonated with so many people, and that's not so hard to figure out why. Again, half of the population will go through menstruation. So as we started to put the film on the film festival circuit, which is what we did, it immediately won what's called the Jury Award at the Cleveland Film Festival, and that immediately qualified the film to be an Oscar candidate. And about 100 and something, 130 short films qualify every year to be Oscar nominees. And then it's a whole process, but it's kind of like from the start, you could almost feel it that people were responding to the film. We at first thought we were making a film that we were gonna put on our website of our nonprofit and say, hey, look at this issue. But it became clear we had something bigger. And Sikya Entertainment out of India volunteered their production costs for free, because Guneet Manga, who is an Oscar winner herself and a wonderful producer had been in LA and somebody in our community knew her. She heard about what we were doing and she said, I love this project. I'm going to lend my help. So it's like this kismety thing where we got this incredible assistance that helped it along. But I do think that incredible assistance came because the students were asking, because they understood how much their education meant to them, and they understood that girls their age around the world shouldn't be denied the same opportunity.
So that's the best part of the story. This is like you got to make this with your students and
I
you met so many
know.
good people. And how has your relationship with your students, the ones who came with you on this journey, and also like in terms of you being a teacher at the school, like has that changed now that you've been working on menstrual equity?
It has. I have to figure it all out, and I haven't yet. So, so because I really love teaching literature, and I love working with student activists and supporting the work of the PAD project. And I'm blessed to say that the PAD project has really grown in size, and now that it's gotten bigger, we're probably going to have to figure out a way to do it all. Right now, the school has been very supportive of my dividing my time between the PAD project work and teaching English. And so I still take the trips to the United Nations every year. I just got back with a contingency of 13 students who this year our topic was looking at human sex trafficking and the links between the onset of menstruation and the vulnerability to being sex trafficked for girls. We partnered with another organization called OmniOp, and each year we partner with a different organization and return to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And you had asked what my relationship was with the students who founded the PAD project. And that relates to what my relationship is with the current Oakwood students, which is to say that one thing that I love best and what continues to inspire me every day about this work is that there's kind of a sisterhood. And now I want to say brotherhood because we have men and boys, young men in the PAD project as well. And so the founders of the PAD project are now in their mid to late 20s. One of them is a member on our board to represent the young boys. One of them is our social media and marketing coordinator. Others of them are chairs for our ambassador cohorts. So they keep involved. And what I love is that they're there to support the younger women coming up, not just with the PAD project and our mutual passion for menstrual equity, but they come to the school at Oakwood, their old stomping grounds, and they'll talk to the ninth graders, and the ninth graders will say what they're going through in their life. And so the older students will say, oh, don't worry about that. I've been through that. It's okay. And it's really heartwarming to see so many students kind of come through and support and kind of continue pass the torch tradition. I think I love that.
I love that so much. That's so cool and so needed, to have some kind of
Yeah.
mentorship and fellowship. And looking
Yes.
back on your journey, Melissa, what has surprised you the most about these documentaries, about the PAD project, about menstrual equity? What has surprised you the most?
It honestly surprises me the most that we made it, that we're still here, that the PAD project, I hope, well, first of all, I hope there's no need for the PAD project. That's the ultimate goal, probably for any nonprofit, that there will be menstrual equity and nobody will have to fight for a means to manage her period. But it has surprised me that we've managed to stay and grow and be in as many countries now as we are. I think we're in 13 countries, last counting, with different kinds of programs, not always the pad machine, which is great, but with reusable pads or washable pads. So that's one kind of pad, with menstrual cups, which is a great sustainable solution. Every community is different. So one thing that just surprises me is we're here. And again, I think that's because so many people relate to this issue. And so many people, even if they hadn't considered it in their past, it's obvious to them once they hear about it. And I think that men have been such a great support as well. So many different men have come to me and said, I didn't know how to talk to my daughter about menstruation, and I saw this film or that film, Long Line of Ladies or Period End of Sentence, and now I feel like I can talk to her in a safe or comfortable way that I hadn't known before. And I think that menstrual health education is being it's tipping toward including boys and men in that conversation, and that's so crucial. And I just think the more that we learn about each other, menstrual health was just accepted as a vital sign. I think that was 2 years ago. It was finally added as a vital sign for women's health. So all these things are happening. And even though it may not be or seem surprising, it is surprising. When I think of where we were, of not even recognizing this as an issue, and now, seeing a newscaster, to the point I was saying earlier, where some TV shows, mainstream, don't even want to pick up the topic, I will now see a newscaster on a big news network say things like, after there's been a natural disaster, like, don't forget the need for menstrual health care supplies or something like that. So part of me is just surprised and astonished by how far this has come. And then beyond that, I constantly am surprised, now that I'm so in this work, why wasn't this a movement so much earlier? Because
Right.
to think about human beings, thousands and thousands of years old as a human race, and yet this movement for menstrual equity, I think it's about 15 years old, if that, which is pretty striking too. So I think there are both sides of it. It's moving fast, but why hasn't it started to move till now?
Right, right, right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it does take a lot of time for things to sort of catch on. But I'm also curious, Melissa. What would be your big call to action for those of us listening? What do you want? Like, what would be a best case scenario moving forward?
I think always so destigmatizing periods, normalizing periods, being able to talk without shame about menstruation and menopause, which is also completely underfunded and not understood, but to insist that this is a normal biological function and not a cause for shame or stigma, to host screenings of Long Line of Ladies or Period End of Sentence, or there are other terrific films out there. I'm trying to think of the one, Panda, something. It was just recently out. It's an animated film. It's wonderful, where a period sort of takes the shape of an animated panda. It's a
That's so
terrific
funny.
film. Yeah, and so I think normalizing periods in your talk, of course, donations always help. Period care products are the third or fourth most requested but under included item in emergency relief care kits around the world. So understanding that any crisis, whether it's a natural disaster or war or conflict, is horrific enough, but to be displaced from one's place of living without, and then having your period on top of that is so distressing. So also recognizing the need for period supplies for all people in those times. And I think those are the things. We're at www.thepadproject.org, and on our website you can see different ways to advocate and promote menstrual equity. We're really proud to be part of a coalition along with Days for Girls and other organizations, which are terrific organizations, working to make period positive workplaces. So that would be that a place of employment would need to commit to having period care products readily available in all office spaces and in all bathrooms. That would be important to recognize periods as the cause of severe illness for many people, that's a real thing. There's endometriosis, PCOS, so many things that are, again, underdiagnosed and underseen. So there's just so many different ways, ramifications, but I think just being verbal advocates for period justice and for not discriminating against people with periods.
I love that. I love that. Melissa, thank you so much for your work. The world has changed so much because of you and your amazing documentary, the advocacy work that you're doing with the PAD Project, and all the other things, and all the students whose lives have changed. Where can people find you? Where's the best place to go on the web and find you?
Thank you so much. www.thepadproject.org. I also have a website if you want to get in touch with me, which is just Melissa Berton, BERTON.com. And you can write to me at the PAD Project. So I think those are the two places.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa. Really appreciate you so much for your time.
Thank you, Yasmin. It was wonderful talking to you, and thank you for taking the time to highlight this issue. Not everybody wants to, and I really, really appreciate it. And your questions were so thought-provoking and insightful, so thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about menstrual equity and period health with Melissa Berton at the PAD Project. And you could tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, consciousness, and spirituality. Thanks again.